I usually preach the sermon on Saturday to an empty room, and then I preach it on Sunday to a full room, and it's more fun on Sundays. So, thank you. Hey, last week was Trunk or Treat, and wow, it was absolutely amazing. So first of all, thank you to all of our volunteers who came out and made that happen. I'll give you just a quick report, show you some pictures, but we had 1,150 people that came and attended, and just so you know, those are not pastor numbers, okay? We had volunteers at the entrances with counters, and they're literally counting every person coming in, and over 75 volunteers that helped to make this happen, and we had a spiritual engagement survey that we were doing, and 167 people responded to that survey, so that really helped us in learning about our community and the needs in our community and their perspectives on the church and what's going on. But really, the most exciting part for me of the whole night is 67 of those that responded said, yes, please call me and let's go to coffee and talk about our faith. And so that group has already, come on. So those 67, we've already begun corresponding with them, and this week we have an incredible team of volunteers that are going to be calling them and saying, hey, let's schedule a time to go to coffee or tea or whatever works for you, and let's get together and talk about faith. And so that part is the most exciting. I'll tell you one quick story. So I'm always in charge of buying the candy, and I'm usually accused by my wife of buying too much candy, which I don't think that's such a thing, but she tries. And so she had me buy candy. I bought the candy this year, and the event went till 8:30. Okay, at 8 o'clock, she comes to me with this little tiny bucket of candy, and she had one of our volunteers. I think it was Stephanie. She had a little tiny bucket of candy as well, and she comes to me. She says, at 8 o'clock, this is all the candy we have left. So they've been like going around and refilling the buckets. And the great man of faith I am, I just laid my hands on the buckets. And I said, Lord, you've multiplied bread and fish. Will you just help it to make it to 8:30? I don't need 12 buckets left over at the end. Just make it last till 8:30. And I'm happy to tell you, I'm not sure if it was a miracle or not, but it lasted till 8:30, okay? We did have enough candy. In fact, we had like this much left over. It had to be a miracle, Pastor Jerry. It had to be. But thank you. So many of you came out and you were amazing. And I want to show you a couple of pictures of some of the trunks. And what we did as a staff is we got together this week. And Pastor Jason, if you'll roll that card out here, we've got some prizes. You didn't even know we were doing this, but we've got some prizes for some of you. We just went through the pictures and we just picked out some. All of you did a great job, but we picked a few out that we just wanted to draw attention to. Aren't these amazing? Aren't these amazing? All right, so the first trophy, I might have you run this up because they're in the balcony, but this is the sweetest, we call this the sweetest trunk, okay, the sweetest trunk. Can we put that picture up? The sweetest trunk. And the winner goes to the Garcia clan. I'm going to say the whole clan because this was like all of the family members. Y'all, they worked on their trunk for a month and a half. All right? They took one of those toy cars that like a toddler drives, a preschooler drives, and they made it into like a photo op for kids. And I mean, y'all, it was just nuts. All the stuff there. And like all the family, they all pitched in there. And so I'm just going to run this up to y'all. There's a gift card. And if I don't see this trophy in your home when I come to visit, I'll be very upset. Okay? All right, so there's that one. They're up there. Give those guys a hand. Okay, so what we're gonna do. So 2 of these are not here today. So we're gonna do the other 2 next week. Okay, because it's more fun when they're here. This one, we came up with an award for the most inventive game. Okay, the most inventive game. So there were all kinds of games, like they had throwing balls and getting them in cups and throwing rings over things, all kinds of stuff. But the most inventive game, this is going to give away who the winner is. But this family has a plumber in the family, and we're getting ready, and a big plumbing truck pulled up into the parking lot. I didn't know exactly what was happening, and they started unloading like pipes and drills and saws and all kinds of stuff. And they had water pumps, and they filled a tank, and you put a pumpkin in the tube, and you had to pump the water, and the pumpkin would race around the tube. And y'all, it was so much fun. Like, I tried it myself. I mean, the kids were going, and they had clappers, and so like when the kids were racing, they're over there like with their clappers. I mean, you just thought like every 30 seconds it was a party going on right there. Okay, and so the Hernandez family got the most inventive game. Okay, would you run this back here to these guys? All right. Would y'all stand up? Right? Since you're down here, I'm going to embarrass you. Y'all, that was amazing. All right. So, Pastor Jason, we're just going to give these two away next week. If they're not here next week, they don't get the prize. All right. So, real quick, and then we'll get into the message. Pastor Jerry mentioned we were part of the Teen Challenge banquet this week, and I mentioned it last week in my message because I was talking about the VIP experience and how we have full access to the Lord. We had special privileges, and I was telling this story, and so we got to meet Jep Robertson from the Duck Commanders, and I have a picture because I told you I was going to show you a picture. So that's Jep on the left of me. I'm not the duck commander, even though I have a pretty decent beard. And I challenged him to a duck call contest, and I graciously allowed him to win because I didn't want to embarrass him in front of all those people, okay? But it was such a great night. We helped raise a ton of money for Teen Challenge and had so much fun. All right, you ready for the message? Yeah. I'm glad. So we're in a series right now called Come Near. It's really based out of a theme verse that we have for the entire year of 2021, found in James chapter 4, verse 8. It's a short verse that has a powerful promise for God's people. And so I'm going to ask you on the count of 3 to say it out loud with me. We're going to just say this, declare it over our lives, our families, our church, our city, because this is an incredible promise. So say it with me on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Come near to God, and He will come near to you. So in this series, we've already talked about the posture that promotes the presence of God. We've talked about prioritizing the presence of God. And today, I want to talk about protecting the presence of God, protecting the presence. Think about the great lengths that we go to protect the things that we deem valuable in our lives, right? Like for Trunk or Treat, we rented these big towable light stands so that we could have plenty of light out in the parking lot. And, when it all finished, y'all did amazing. We cleaned everything up, and we had a crew. They shut the lights down, and what we did is we towed all of them right in front of the offices, and we did that because we have good lighting there, and usually lighting deters thieves, and we have a Ring camera there, and so we could watch and be notified if someone was tampering with it, and then we put them all together, and we parked cars all around it, and left our van, our trailer. I mean, we just blocked it in there, and if someone wanted them, they could have got them, but they would have had to work extra hard, and that was the idea. It was I don't want to buy a bunch of light stands. I just want to return them tomorrow, and get them back and get our deposit back, and so we went to some lengths to make sure they were safe overnight. When Lisa and I were building our house last year, there were many nights that my dog Cooper and I spent the night on the property in a little trailer, and I had a 45 on the nightstand and a 12 gauge by the door, and I'm glad I didn't have to use them. I might not be your pastor today, okay? But we had a bunch of valuable stuff there, right? And so I told Lisa, I'm not going to let someone, if they're going to take it, they're going to come through Cooper and then my 12 gauge, all right? That's how we're going to work this thing, all right? We go to great lengths to protect things that are valuable, right? I mean, it just seems like we live in a day where almost everyone has cameras, on their house and devices. Mercy was at a birthday party last night, and they did a scavenger hunt after dark. And so she came home, and she's telling us how they were going around, and they had to get find 5 black cars, and they're going up in people's driveways with flashlights to inspect their cars. And Lisa goes, "Oh, that's not good. Everyone has cameras now." And she's like, "We're all right, Mom, we're all right." Everyone has cameras and security systems and lights that come on, and businesses now are hiring armed guards, and we're putting locks on things, and we're buying safes. And you get the picture. We go to great lengths to protect the things that we deem valuable. And there's probably many things in your life that you, if you were to evaluate, you'd say, these are the valuables in my life. Like there might be some belongings, that are valuable. I remember when Lisa bought the first Vitamix that our family owned. She fell in love with it. And I always teased, but I think it had some truth to it. I said, if our house catches on fire, you're going to watch Lisa running out with the Vitamix in her hand. Leave the baby pictures, like I don't even know where Jason is. I have the Vitamix, I don't know what you deem valuable of your belongings, but there's some things, and hopefully you have some relationships in your life that are valuable, that are worth fighting for, that are worth believing in, that are worth going through the hard parts of life to make sure that they stay intact. Or in today's culture, maybe your data is valuable. All those O's and ones, all those passwords, all the things that help you to live life. In the world we are today. So maybe you protect your data, or maybe some pictures or some memories. Listen to what the psalmist says in Psalm 84. He says, "Better is one day in your courts," talking about the Lord, "than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked." The psalmist, he says, better is one day in your presence, God, than 1,000 doing anything else. 1,000 anywhere else. What he's doing, he's establishing value. He's saying, look, the presence of God is valuable to me. And we've been talking a lot in this series about the presence of God, because I'll just make some statements. The presence of God is a game changer. Do you believe that? The presence of God, it literally changes atmospheres. The presence of God, it's wonderful. There's benefits in the presence of God. Here's just one. Psalm 16, verse 11 says this. He says, "You make known to me the path of life, and you fill me with joy in your presence." In the presence of God, you find joy, you find hope, you find peace, you find all kinds of things. And one of the most amazing things about God's presence is that the presence of God is accessible. It's accessible. It's not far off. It's not hard to get. It's not behind lock and key. There's not a security system. Protecting it. The presence of God is accessible. And we kind of started this conversation last week. But I'll just refresh you. The presence of God is accessible anytime and anywhere. Isn't that good news? You can access the presence of God driving in your car, or walking down the road, or in church, or in your home, you can access the presence of God in a group like we are today, or you can access the presence of God by yourself, or you can, it's anytime, anywhere, you can access the presence of God. And this is just amazing, but today I want to talk to you about protecting the presence of God. And here's why, is because I think there's a mistake that we make because of the level of accessibility. In other words, because it's so accessible, because you can just, talk to God anywhere, anytime. I think we make a mistake and we take it for granted. And so I want to help you today to protect that, to really watch and be aware and not just let this slip by, but to make it a priority. There's kind of a tension that we live in. And I want to show you this tension in the life of a guy named David. We're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 6. I'll just set it up for you. David is the king over Israel. And when we pick up this story in 2 Samuel 6, here's what's going on, is that for many years, Jerusalem had been under the control of a foreign army called the Jebusites, okay? And in the past, they had enjoyed the presence of God, but now, for quite some time, the people of God have been in a very difficult season, and they find themselves feeling very far from the Lord. I don't know if you've ever been in a place like that, but you feel far from God. And if you're there today, and I'm talking about accessibility, and I'm saying you can get to God anytime, anywhere, but if you feel far from God, you're like, I don't know. I mean, it feels like I pray and it just doesn't go anywhere, or I pray and I don't hear anything back, or I've been asking for direction, but I don't see that He's leading me anywhere. And maybe that's you. That's where the people of God are in 2 Samuel 6. Is they had enjoyed the presence of God, but now as they're under control of an enemy army, they just feel so far from God. And here's the reality, is the presence of God had departed this city. And I'll show it to you. David became the king, and he liberates Israel, and he kicks the Jebusites out, and it's a good time in their history. Jerusalem is now in the right hands. They have the right leaders, and the enemy is no longer occupying their city, but that wasn't enough. And David knew, he knew that something was missing, and what it was is, he says, it's time for the presence of God to return. Couldn't we make a similar statement about our city, about the places that we inhabit? It's time for the presence of God to return. Do you believe that? It's time for the presence of God to return to Albuquerque. It's time for the presence of God to return in force to New Mexico. Or maybe you're just like today, it's time for the presence of God to return to my house, right? To my neighborhood, to my family, to my home. And if you've been living feeling like you're far from the presence of God today, I especially want you to pay attention today as we move through this story, because I just have such high expectations today about what God's going to do in all of our lives, but especially in your life today if you feel like you're far from the Lord. So what I want to do, we're about to get into this story, but I want to pause and I want to ask you to pray with me. And we do this pretty much every week, but here's the prayer, is we stop and we just kind of quiet our hearts and we pray a prayer that says something like this: Lord, I'm ready. I'm listening today. Will you speak to me today? You know what I need, probably better than I know, so will you just talk to me today? How many of you will pray that prayer today? It's a life-changing prayer, so just get ready. All right, let's pray. Jesus, we are so thankful that today your presence is here. We don't take it for granted. So we just pause and we push aside the distractions and the things that would keep us from hearing your word today. And we open our hearts all the way, fully, completely open to you. And we just ask all across this room that every person, the things that we need to hear from you today, Lord, we just ask you to speak to us. And we just say, we're listening today. In Jesus' name, everyone said, Amen. 2 Samuel chapter 6, starting in verse 1, says this: David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. Say that number out loud with me. Say 30,000. That's a big number, right? He gathers 30,000 men, and he's got a mission. He and all his men went to Bala in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim and the ark. They set the ark of God on a new cart, and they brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on a hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. Now let me pause in the story because I want to make sure you know what's happening here. In the Old Testament, the presence of God was literally housed in a box that was called the Ark of the Covenant. And it was really this simple. Wherever the Ark was, that's where the presence of God was. And there were some really specific instructions that were given about this Ark and how it was to be handled. And if it were to be moved, if the Ark was going to be transported, then God mandated there was a specific method to transport the ark. In fact, it was to be placed on poles that were carried by priests. So there would be a priest on each corner, and they had a pole, and they'd pick up the ark, and they would transport it that way. And there was some more to it, but that was it in a nutshell. So this was an agonizingly slow and difficult process for these 4 priests to pick it up and carry it. And every so often they had to stop and they had to do a ritual, and they'd pick it back up and they'd go. And so it was a slow process. One that, frankly, it was too slow for David. Do you know anybody like this in your life that things are just too slow for them, right? Some of you are nodding, I can tell. Kind of the normal, rhythm of life would be like this. It would be ready, aim, fire, right? Just kind of this, like it's just a normal rhythm. Ready, aim, fire. I'm making a decision. Ready, aim, fire. But there are some people, right? I know some, and they're like this. Ready, aim, 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 aim. Do you know anyone like this? And if you're like me, you're behind them like, shoot, something, anything. We don't care. We'll fix it later. Shoot. You know anyone like that? So here's me. Ready? Bang! What'd I hit? Shoot, go find the target, figure out what I hit, make up a story. No, right? I think this was David. And to be fair, David had really good intentions. He knew that Jerusalem needed God's presence. And he wanted to bring God's presence back to Jerusalem. But things are moving too slow. And so he took things into his own hands, and he said, I've got a faster way to do this. Have you ever thought that about God's plans? You're like, I have a better way, God. If you would have asked me, God, I have a faster way to get there. I have a faster way to reach my family. I have a faster way to, whatever the thing is that you're trying to do. And to be fair, David had seen this method of transportation before, so he just kind of borrowed the idea. You'd have to go back and read the story, but there's a story when the Philistines, they actually steal the ark of God from the people of God, and when they do, they put the ark on a cart, because they're not mandated to move it in the same way. So they put it on a cart, and off they go with the ark of God on a cart, and David saw this, and he thought, I know there's a faster way to move the cart than to move it with the priest. There's a more efficient way than to move it. You can read about that in 1 Samuel chapter 6, verse 7. So David makes a mistake. He decides, maybe God's law doesn't apply to me, right? They didn't have to do it that way. Maybe we don't have to do it that way. And he decided that God's way was too slow, and so he took a shortcut. So I don't know about you, but sometimes life just is moving too slow, and God's moving too slow, and we're tempted to take things into our own hands. I checked into a hotel recently, and I don't know if you've noticed or not, but like customer service is like gone. Have you noticed that? I mean, almost every industry. I mean, we're hiring are you breathing? You're hired, right? It's kind of the new method. And so I checked into a hotel, and I'm just, the whole time I'm thinking, you should not be working here. Like, you have the personality of a rock, okay? And she was just slow and inefficient. And I'm crawling inside, y'all. Like unless you have ADHD, you don't understand what it feels like. I mean, inside, I'm about to crawl over the counter and check myself in. Like, I could figure this out. I've never done it, but I'll figure it out faster than you. I promise, right? Like, you ever felt that way? I think that's how David felt here, right? He's on a mission. He's bringing the presence of God back to the city, right? And I'll read you the next verse, but he comes up with a plan. They're moving the ark, and they're pretty happy about their plan. Because look at this, verse 5. David and all of Israel were celebrating with all of their might before the Lord. They've got all these instruments, right? Castanets and harps and lyres and timbrels and sistrums. Well, I don't know what that is. And cymbals. And I mean, it's a party, right? I mean, the presence of God is coming back to Israel. Right? Like they're just drumming and clapping. And I mean, it is exciting. They're on their way back. And watch what happens, verse 6. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah, remember Uzzah earlier, he's one of the guys that's helping guide the cart. So Uzzah's there. He reaches out, and he took hold of the ark of God because the ox stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. So just remember, God had told him how to do it, and David's disobeying, and now Uzzah disobeys, and he reaches out and he touches it. And watch this. God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. This is one of those crazy Old Testament stories that you're like, what is happening here, right? They're in a hurry. They put the ark on a cart instead of on poles carried by priests. The ox stumbles, the ark wobbles, and Uzzah reaches out his hand to steady it, and as a result, God strikes him dead. Verse 8, then David became angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day, the place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of the Lord. Watch this. David, now the fear of the Lord comes into him. David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, how can the ark of the Lord ever come to me? In other words, how can I ever accomplish this mission of returning the presence of God to Jerusalem? And it says this, he was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Let me ask you a question. I had you say this number out loud so you'll remember it. How many men did David have with him? 30,000. So imagine this. They run into a problem, right? The ox stumbles, Uzzah touches it, he dies. And David says, how can we ever do this? And he gets all 30,000 of his men together, and he says, guys, we're going back to Jerusalem without the presence of God. I'm not up for this task. We can't do this. We got to figure something else out. And so they abandon the entire mission, and 30,000 men go back home. And can you just imagine when they get home? Right? All of their spouses and children are waiting on them, and the elders are waiting, and all the priests are waiting, and they're waiting there, and they see him coming, and there had to be like an excitement in the town, like, here they come, here comes David, here comes the army, here comes the ark, and the first couple guys come through, and like, where's the ark, where's the ark, where's the ark, where's the ark? God, we didn't get it. What do you mean? What do you mean you didn't get it? Well, it was too hard. We weren't willing to pay the price to bring the presence of God back to our city, so we abandoned the mission. Can you imagine how deflating this had to have been to the city? Like, you were going to get the presence of God. We need the presence of God. How could you do this? So what did David do with it? Watch this, verse 10. This is a crazy detail. It says, instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. Now, I won't go into this too much, but Obed-Edom was from the same city as Goliath. And if you remember, Goliath was that giant who was making fun of and ridiculing the people of God. And David, as a young man, shows up, and here's the giant, ridiculing God's people. And David looks around, he's like, is nobody going to do something about this? And nobody's going to do something. And he goes, I'll do something about it. So David goes and kills the giant Goliath. But now he's on a mission to bring the presence of God back to his city. He gets filled with the fear of God when Uzzah dies, and he says, I know, I'll take it to Obed-Edom, who's from the same city as Goliath. Is that crazy or what? It's like, David, lapse of judgment? What are you doing? But then think about this. Can you imagine how Obed felt? Knock, knock, knock. Hi, Obed. I'm David. This ark just killed someone named Uzzah. All he did was touched it. Can I leave it in your house? Like in your living room? That'd be a good spot. Thanks, I'm the king. Puts it in there. Can you imagine? Obed's like putting, barricades around. He pulls his kids together. He's like, I know I've told you not to touch the hot stove. I know I've told you not to get in the cookies. But listen to me, kids. Do not, whatever you do, touch the ark. You will die. Right? Can you imagine this? So he leaves the ark at Obed-Edom's house, right? Verse 11, the ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months. And watch this. The Lord blessed him and his entire household. I think this is a pretty neat detail. The ark lived in Obed's house for 3 months. And all of a sudden, the blessing of God is on his entire house. Coincidence? I don't think so. The blessing of God all of a sudden is on the work of his hands. It's on his children. It's on his flocks. It's on the blessing of God is on that. And I just got to show this to you because it's so amazing. He had the ark living in his house for 3 months. The presence of God is in his house for 3 months. He's blessed beyond belief, right? But I want to show you, Obed didn't just fall in love with the blessings that came from the ark being there. He literally falls in love with the presence of God. I'll show it to you. After 3 months, David comes back to Obed's house and he gets the ark and he moves it to Jerusalem. I'll show you the rest of the story, but I got to take you on a quick little detour because this is amazing. He gets the ark and he moves it, and I want to show you what Obed does, okay? 1 Chronicles chapter 16 tells us this. It says, he also left Obed-Edom and his 68 associates to minister. Obed-Edom, son of Jeduthun, and also Hosea were gatekeepers. Okay, so here's, you got to kind of study this to see it. But here's what happens. David comes and he gets the ark and he moves it. And Obed says, you know what? I would rather be a gatekeeper for the presence of God than stay here in my house where the presence has departed. So he picks up everything, he sells everything, and he moves to Jerusalem, and he literally takes one of the lowest jobs in the kingdom. He says, I'll just stand at the door, right? And I'll just be the gatekeeper. I'll just make sure that the right people get in and the wrong people don't get in. And I know it doesn't pay much, and I know it doesn't come with any clout or any benefit, but I would rather be a gatekeeper than to stay where the presence of God has left. A gatekeeper is not a priest. It's the lowest on the totem pole. It kind of reminds me of Joshua. We saw this a couple of weeks ago where Moses goes to the tent of meeting. Do you remember this? And he meets with God. And Joshua is young and he's there and he's with Moses. And it says that Moses left. I'll show you. It's in Exodus 33. It says inside the tent of meeting, the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. We talked about that. And it says afterward, Moses would return to the camp, but the young man who assisted him, Joshua, son of Nun, would remain behind in the tent of meeting. It was this hunger in Joshua. It was this hunger in Obed. It's this hunger in the psalmist in 84 where he says, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 doing anything else. Really, this is kind of the basis of this series, right? James 4, come near to God. He comes near to us. Here's another one, Jeremiah 29:13. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart. Let me just give you a preview. Let me kind of jumpstart your heart for a minute. At the end of the message, in just a few minutes, we're going to provide you an opportunity to get into the presence of God, okay? And I'm telling you because I don't want you to miss it. Because better is 10 minutes in the presence than doing anything else, right? I mean, it's Joshua saying, I'm not going anywhere. It's Obed saying, I'll move, I'll follow, I'll do whatever it takes. The presence of God is valuable, and I'll do whatever I got to do. 2 Samuel 6, we'll go back, verse 12. So King David's told, the Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and everything he has. Watch, because of the ark of God. Not because Obed's awesome, right? Not because he started a new business, not because he struck oil, and so word's spreading, right? The blessing of God is on Obed. The people are chattering, they're talking, they're tweeting, they're posting, they're texting, it's spreading. And all of a sudden, King David gets word of the blessing of God that's on Obed. And so watch this, the rest of verse 12. David went to bring the ark of God from the house of Obed to the city of David, to the city of Jerusalem. So David decides again, he says, all right, we got to do this. Mission back on track. We're going to get the ark. We're going to get the presence of God. And just notice this, that what David could have done is David could have just called Obed and said, hey, the blessing is there in your house. Can I just come move in with you, right? I just want to be blessed, right? I want all my ideas to be blessed and my fortune to be blessed and and so Obed just add a room on, and I'll just move in with you. No, David knew it wasn't about a place, right? But it was about the presence. And I'm pointing this out because I'm a little bit fearful that modern day Christianity has kind of become about chasing the blessings rather than pursuing the presence. I mean, the blessings are just, let's admit it, they're fun, right? Like it's fun when you just realize that the blessing of God is on you and you're like, wow, I always tell people, I'm like, look, when the favor of God is there, run as fast as you can, as far as you can, do as much as you can, just go. I mean, like it's there, just take advantage of it. But let me just tell you something, it's not about the blessings. It's about the presence. It's about intimacy with a God who wants to know you and love you and spend time with you and help you and grow you and talk to you. And I'm just so concerned that we've missed the mark. David knew this, so he says, we got to go get the ark. We got to bring the presence of God. But this time's different. Verse 13, when those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, they stopped. They sacrificed a bull, a fatted calf. So they're following the method that God had mandated. That's what you're seeing here. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sounds of trumpets. So in other words, they're doing it the right way. David had learned an important lesson. He wasn't going to try to handle holy things with human hands, with human strength, or with human wisdom. This is the lesson he learned. It's holy. I can't just take it into my own hands. I can't come up with my own strategies. I can't operate out of my own resources or my own strength. And here's the tension that I mentioned at the beginning. So I'm going to come back here, and here's where we'll end today. Here's the tension is I believe there's a tension between accessibility and holiness. Because anything that's widely accessible, we lose the awe of it pretty fast, right? Like, this is probably the best way I can describe it is, for those of you who've been married for 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years, right? It's like the longer you're married, you have accessibility. I mean, you live, right? Like I live with the girl that I wanted to get, right? Like I saw her, it sounds like a caveman, but I saw her, I wanted her, I conquered, I beat all the other guys out, I convinced her, and she moved in with me, right? We got married, and is this making any sense? And the longer you're together, you just kind of like, you just start taking it for granted, like, she'll be here tomorrow when I wake up. And she'll be here next week when I wake. She'll be here next year when I wake up. And then she looks at you and she goes, will you take me on a date sometime? It's been a little while, right? And you're like, oh, yeah, right? You're looking at me like you don't know anything about what I'm talking about. Jerry doesn't. Anything that's just, it's easy, it's accessible. Like, you start to lose the awe. You start to lose the wonder. You start to lose the passion. It just wanes. And this is what we have to protect, right? Is sometimes we just get so comfortable with things that they're always around. They're always available. Like I'm going to show up on Sunday and we're going to worship and God's presence is going to come, right? I'm going to go to life group and we're going to have fun and then we're going to pray and God's presence is going to come and we just take it for granted. It's just so common. It becomes mundane, right? I'm asking you today to protect the presence, to not let the things of God, the presence of God, become mundane. Sacred things they're so accessible today. Anytime, anywhere, you can access the presence of God. But we can't let the sacred become common. We gotta protect the presence. The ark, it said early in the story, it said that the ark was in Abinadab's house, and historians and scholars believe that Uzzah, remember the guy who died for touching it, that Uzzah probably, this is what they believe, that he grew up in or around Abinadab's home. In other words, he just grew so accustomed, like, there's the ark. Like he just saw it like every day. I mean, he's like eating dinner. Oh, the ark's over there, and they're playing games and, they're bouncing balls off the ark and I don't know what, whatever they did. It's just like it's just there. It's always going to be here. It lost the specialness, right? So when the ox hit the bump and the cart, shifted, Uzzah didn't think twice about touching it. In fact, he'd probably touched it many times before. But this time was different because they were on a mission to transport the presence of God back to their home city. And God said, when you do it, it's holy. And this is how you need to do it. This is the method. This is how I want you to do it. And Uzzah it had become so common and so normal. Just think for just a minute. How scary is it to think that the presence of God could become so common to you and I that we just take it for granted? Like I'm just going to show up and it's going to be there. I know He's going to be there. I know. So what's the answer? What's the answer? I'm so glad you asked that this morning. I think it's that we have to protect the presence of God in our hearts. That we have to live with a fresh awareness of God's constant presence. It's this tension that while He's always here, because He's omnipresent, right? He's always here, and we have full access, that it's sacred. It's sacred. Like I was thinking, we were worshiping, I was looking around, and I don't know, this is the heart of a pastor, but I love watching you worship. I love watching you just close your eyes and lift your hands and bow your heads and kneel before the Lord and just become consumed with the presence of God, with the holiness. Like I can just see, I see it on you. And I've been there myself, where it's just like there's a moment where you just realize, like, I am not just in a room with a bunch of my friends, but God's presence has come, and oh my goodness, and I'm not worthy, and He's holy, and this is a sacred moment. You feel like Moses. He's like I got to take my shoes off. I'm on holy ground, or I got to bow. Like I love those moments. And that's what I'm trying to say to you today is, yes, you have access. You can worship Him, you can pray, you can spend time with Him anywhere, anytime, and that is awesome. But also, He's holy. But also, this is sacred. I kind of stumbled on a verse yesterday, Ezekiel 44. There's some instructions being given to the priests. And there's a whole chapter, and there's all these instructions being given to the priests, and they're instructed in verse 23. how to teach the Word of God. And watch this. It says, they are to teach my people the difference between the holy and the common, and to show them how to distinguish between the unclean and the clean. I'm just telling you, I like accidentally found that verse. I mean, I think the Holy Spirit led me there, but I wasn't planning on it. And yesterday I found that verse, and I'm like, that's it. That's where we're at, Harvest. Is we got to be able to differentiate. And watch this. If you can't differentiate between the sacred or the holy and the common, you're going to really easily start getting mixed up on the clean and the unclean. You're going to very quickly start kind of meshing these and blurring the lines and like, well, we call them gray areas in our society. It's like, well, is it okay to do this? Well, let's go back to the holiness and let that answer the question, right? The holiness will answer the question of the clean and the unclean. But if you can't tell the difference between the holy and the common, your heart's just going to become diluted. You're just going to take it for granted. Am I making any sense? So why don't you stand with me this morning? You know this is about to happen because the worship team's behind me. And they're playing soft, beautiful, melodious tunes to get your heart ready. Isn't it amazing? Does it help get your heart ready, or does it just tell you that I'm about to end? What? Yes, right? We do this every week, okay? So I have to like warn you because of what I preached today. Like, don't let this moment become common. Don't let this be like, it's the last song, and then he's going to get up and dismiss us. Where are we going to lunch? Right? Like, don't let this moment pass. What's about to happen is a holy moment. It's a sacred moment. God's presence is going to interact with you. We prayed that prayer earlier. We said, God, whatever you want to say to me today, I'm ready. He's going to talk to you. Some of you, when I said, some of you feel like God's far off. We were talking about how Jerusalem felt like God was far off. I literally watched as some of you nodded your heads in that moment. You were like, yep. You're like, I'm there. Listen, right now, James 4:8, come near to God, he comes near to us. Like what's about to happen, I'm just telling you, what's about to happen, if you want it, is that God's presence is going to come near to you. I mean, just as close as he could ever be. And if you'll let this won't just be a final song led by a great band, it'll be a holy moment. If you'll let this, the Holy Spirit will come and he'll speak to you and he'll help you and he'll encourage you and he'll give you wisdom and he'll show you what's next and he'll guide you and he'll prepare you. And I'm just telling you, like, I don't know why you came to church, but I think everything you came for will be found in these next couple of moments. Are you ready? So worship team's going to lead us. Y'all, I can't even tell you how high my expectations are right now that the presence of God is going to come and interact with his people in a holy moment. Let's enjoy his presence.